It's my pleasure to welcome you to Geoff Whiteman's program that he's going to present this workshop. We have 1 hour for the workshop, and then we have to go over and eat lunch. So we got to keep to time. I've known Geoff for at least a year or two, but I think this is the first time you're presenting at Oak Camper? Yeah. So we're really happy to welcome him. He's been sort of growing up in the community here. He's part of a missionary family. His family has done a lot of missionary work. He's currently the mission care coordinator for the Orthodox Christian Mission Center, the OCMC. So we're trying to kind of look at medical missions from a different perspective than we have before with OCMC. I'm on the board of OCMC, so that gives me great joy to welcome him here. He's currently researching missionary resiliency for his master's in theology from Asbury Theological Seminary. He also has a small e-ministry that he's been doing for a number of years as well. And he says that his wife leads marriage enrichment workshops, which also helps him, and they have 1 child. So please, let's welcome Geoff.
Thank you, Gail. Does anyone not have a handout? Cool. All right. So let me just start with as we're kind of gathering in, I'd really love to just start by hearing a little bit from you about what you're interested in this topic. Missionary resiliency is kind of a unique thing, and so I'd love to just start with kind of, just touching base with you and hearing a little bit about what your interest is.
Where do you want to start with that? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm Susan Hansen Engelhard.
This one.
I'm a licensed mental health counselor in Florida, down the road from OCMC in Orlando, and I am speaking tomorrow on the resilient marriage, and I started thinking about the needs of missionaries, and I've also been twice on short-term missionary trips to the Hogar in Guatemala, where my daughter was a long-term missionary, so that's me.
Yeah, okay, good. So maybe just maybe 1 or 2 other people.
The mic's not on. Yeah,
Okay.
It's only for the recording.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, this room isn't mic'd. We're going to have to talk loud, but it's not that big a room. I think we'll be okay. But that's for the recording.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Sarah Tremblay. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. And I'm interested because before I was married, I did 3 years of missions work in Mexico. And my husband right now is a seminarian at St. Vlad's. And I think in a lot of ways for us being a priest family could be very similar to being a missionary. So.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of overlap. So, yeah. How many of you all know missionaries, related to them, or were a missionary, or are currently a missionary? So, yeah, good, okay. It's always nice to know who you're, talking with, right? So let me go and start with this question. Do you ever marvel at the perseverance of our missionary saints? That is something that just absolutely captivates me. How were they able to do what they did? It's amazing, and are they and how can we follow in their footsteps? How can we support our missionaries today to be like them? That was a question that this is a great picture. So this is in 2007. I started working with OCMC, so it's 10 years ago, and that's Father Mark over there. We met in Alaska doing this short-term trip, and we got a chance to really have that kind of that spiritual encounter with Saint Innocent, and who's just a remarkable man, who translated the gospel into the language of a people that didn't even have an alphabet. Amazing, who built churches and hospitals and orphanages and seminaries and just persevered. And in the end of his life, blind, he leads the church. Amazing. And sets up, mission societies. What a remarkable man. So, 3 weeks ago, I think today, this bottom picture, I was in Athens for the day on the way to a conference in Albania. And these are the steps that lead up to Mars Hill. And I love that picture of them because you can see how they're polished from being walked on by over 2,000 years. And there was something amazing about standing in that place, that very place where 2,000 years ago Paul made the unknown God known. And he proclaimed that unknown God and made him known. And today, you look out over Athens, and from that spot, you can see the temple to Athena. It's impressive. It's impressive. And it's in ruins today. And you look out over Athens, and you see, that it's peppered with Orthodox churches. That 2,000 years ago, St. Paul stood there and said, let me tell you about this unknown God. And today, this land is a land that is where that God is known. That's the sort of remarkable promise of missions, right? And for me, it's a question of how can we help our missionaries today? How can we support them today? So, I was raised as a missionary kid. I told you about working at OCMC. In 2014, I started working in missionary care at OCMC and started my THM from Asbury, and began working towards my license as a marriage and family therapist. So that was a lot to take on in 1 year. So resiliency became a real personal message for me. And I've been working on a research project. I'll tell you a little bit more about it at the end. The goal of it is really to hear from the missionaries who have kind of been there and done that, and learn from them. What are the characteristics of missionaries that are resilient? So I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But I began just by reading what I could about missionary resiliency. What I saw was that there was a model of what it means to be a resilient missionary. And honestly, a lot of what I'm going to share is kind of a footnote to what was just shared this morning. So that's kind of where we'll go. So the first is this: missionaries receive adversity. They respond to that adversity in ways that promote resiliency. That response is kind of a three-legged stool. There's their own response. There's the response of the community around them. And there's can you guys hear me okay in the back? Okay, good. So I get soft-spoken when I talk about things I care a lot about. So will you just kind of give me and that will be good. And they respond in ways that actually shape their sense of self and their sense of the world. And so I want to kind of work through that model a little bit together. I'd also like to share some kind of theological reflections on resiliency, how resiliency is our participation in the death and resurrection of Jesus, how there is this Eucharistic receiving and offering that happens, and kind of talk a little bit about that. And finally, I want to do this in a way that's interactive, where we can have some kind of small group stuff, and I want it to be practical. So that's my hope, that we can interact with each other, and that you will, at the end of this, have at least one thing you can take away that can really applies to you in your context. So that's kind of where we're going. Let me start with this video of Derek Redmond. Are you all familiar with Derek Redmond at all? Okay, good. So he, I believe this is 1992. He ran in the Olympics, and he was favored to win. And so I want you to just watch this video, and I want you to think about, and we're going to kind of talk about this, think about what this moment was like in his life, how much he had prepared for this moment, what this experience was like for him. Think about the people that kind of gather around and the support, and then I want to just talk about that, and then use that as a way to talk about missionary resiliency. So use this as an icon to talk about that. So we'll kind of watch this and talk about it. So let's have a conversation about that. What do you think that moment was like in his life? Kind of put yourself in his shoes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. He finished the race that was set before him. Yeah. Not the way he thought he would, but he did. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is also the power, not only of what he wanted to do, but how the crowd started applauding, and his father came, which is the power of the family.
Yeah.
Not necessarily blood family, but the group of people that really supporting the resiliency of one person. It's not what one person can do, because he kept running, and at the same time we saw him breaking down, and his father started walking with him and talking to him.
Yeah.
And it was that power, the love, that power that actually got him through the end. And he made it. Completely different result than what his pain, his physical pain, created in the first place.
Yeah, so there was. I mean, I really kind of that. He had to get up himself, but he had to like make that internal decision. All right, I want to finish the race, but he couldn't do it without his father coming alongside him and saying, "Do you want to do this?" Yeah, okay, I'm doing it with you. Right. I'm here with you, and the power of that love. Yeah, yeah. Other things kind of stood out to you with this.
Just looking back on it, when he got up and started moving on his own, you could see the pain was very intense, and he was limping quite badly. Mm-hmm. But when his father came and bore part of the weight of the effort of walking, you could see that his steps were much less painful. So there you see that the family is shouldering part of the pain and making it more bearable.
Yeah. Sue Johnson, who's a kind of an influential marriage counselor, says that suffering is inevitable, but suffering alone is intolerable. But suffering alone is intolerable. Suffering is inevitable, but suffering alone is intolerable. That's exactly. Good. So, other thoughts about this. So, yeah.
I'm just thinking that it could have been really humiliating for him to have that happen. I'm thinking that it would have been very humiliating for him to have that happen.
Right.
And then to have his dad come and be there, and to have, somebody else, just even for all the eyes to be looking at, because when you're in so much pain and then people are watching you too, it's just a total doozy. And so for him to have his dad there and sort of, his dad just sort of pushed, it looked like waved off some of the cameras, kept them a little bit at bay. And part of that not being alone was having somebody else to have the eyes on and to have the focus on. Not all the focus was on him and his pain.
Yeah. That's that really brings up for me thinking about Job's friends, who try to help him very unsuccessfully. And there's something about kind of his father being able to sort of be there with him in that moment that made that the turn what could have been a moment of shame into a moment of resiliency. Yeah.
So. I think it's not just only about emotional pain. I mean, I think there was physical pain that his father actually relieved
Yeah.
by being somebody he could lean on.
Yeah.
And I think that so it was important to him probably that it was his father, but I would imagine that somebody else coming to help would have at least relieved part of it.
Right. Yeah. So in some of the other videos, you see his father just waving off these other people who are coming to try to help. And I think the thing that kind of what resonates with me in your comment is that his father had a relationship with him long before this moment that made this moment, different than it would have been if it, so someone else could have helped with that physical pain, but that kind of emotional pain, I think that was something his father and him could bear together.
Well, what I would bet is that he could lean on his father in a way that was different than he could lean on anybody else, right?
Yes.
So it was true for the emotional, but it was also probably true for the physical. I mean, so he could actually I don't know, but I trust people I know better than people I don't know, right? So he could put a physical burden on his father that he couldn't put in the same way on somebody else too.
Yeah.
So I bet it's both.
Yep. Absolutely. Good. So let me just kind of review this model real quick and then kind of explore it together. So I think this video is a wonderful illustration of this really important point that missionaries face adversity, and all of us in ministry face adversity that by its very definition is something that we just can't get over by ourselves. We can't just white knuckle it through it. We can't just, just kind of John Wayne, grin and bear it. Like adversity by its very definition reveals our limits. That's what adversity is. And that and that's something that we receive. And we respond to that adversity in ways that promote resiliency. So we respond ourselves, like him standing up. We have a relational response, like his father coming alongside him. But there's also a communal response, that crowd that cheered him on. And that all three of those responses become this sort of three-legged stool. And the outcome of that is a movement from being a victim who is hurting to becoming a survivor who is healing, and ultimately becoming a celebrant who's helping others heal. And so that's kind of what we'll talk through today. So let's talk a little bit about the adversity that we face in ministry and the missionaries face. So there are certainly those kind of tore your hamstring moments, the kind of trauma that we're aware of. But there's also what we might call the sort of death by 1,000 paper cuts, the accumulation of stress and adversity. Dr. Lois Dodds, who's really like a kind of a matriarch in the field of member care, I did some training with her, and she showed me this graph. It was from about 30 years of research she's been doing, which looks at the Raoul Holmes stress scale. I've got a copy of it. If you would like to take a look at it, I'd be happy to show it to you afterwards. And just looks at the stress that missionaries face kind of in these different stages of their life. So on this scale, 100 points is sort of normal. 300 points is like pretty significant. Like the chances of developing a chronic illness really increases at that point. What she found is that as soon as missionaries begin that process of discerning a call, that stress begins to raise in their life. And it continues to climb through candidacy, through raising support, through training, and really kind of peaks during that first term, that first time of living cross-culturally at about 900, I think like 900 points. And then it sort of drops down and levels off to about 600 points, and then kind of ultimately falls off during retirement. I asked her, like, how do you think missionaries survive this kind of, this stress in their life? That's just astronomical. And she said, I really think it's the Holy Spirit that empowers them, who supports them. One thing that's been interesting in my research is I keep hearing that again and again from people. It's really Christ who does all things. So let's see. so we have those kind of two types of adversity, the sort of like, those kind of like, immediate moment stuff, and you have just the stuff that accumulates. Does that like connect with you? Yeah.
Explain again the research, because I'll tell you, I'm looking at this thing, and I think you could cross out missionary, and you could say physician, or you could say caregiver. When we decide to become a doctor, when we go through our training, medical school, we fresh out of residency. So I think it's applicable. I mean, I know you're talking about missionaries, but I'm interested, do you think when she did her research, do you think it could have been applied to other fields?
Yeah, so what she's done is just had missionaries complete this Rawl Holmes stress scale, which looks at the transition that you've experienced in the last 12 months of your life, and then gives like points for each. So, buying a house is like 100 points of stress. Christmas is 12 points of stress. So, right? And it kind of goes through that. And learning a new language is this many points of stress. And so so you're absolutely right that like it is a reflection of transition, and that, whether you're becoming a physician or you're becoming a missionary, you do go through this season of transition. So I would agree with that. So.
I would like a copy of that.
Yeah, great. So I've got one. Yeah.
I was wondering if she adapted the Holmes-Ray scale to the missionaries, because there's a lot that the missionaries experience that is not on the scale, the original scale.
Yes, she does.
To get to 900. Okay, that's good.
Yes.
It's an adapted.
It's
okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
they sat down and talked about, things like terrorism is on the scale, or learning a new language is on the scale. So
Elephants stampeding through your
right. Yeah. Right. So good. So let's we've kind of. So I think this would be a good sort of small group discussion for us to take a few minutes to do. Would you just maybe gather with the people that you can have a conversation with for just a few minutes and talk through, all of us here know missionaries, care about missionaries, and so let's just talk through some of those common stressors that missionaries might face. Because of the time, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this, not nearly as much as we should, but I think it's a good conversation for us to have. So, and then we'll come back together and talk more. So. I wish we had. I think this would be a great conversation to spend the rest of our time on. There's a few other things we want to kind of get through. So I'd love to just take a second and kind of hear from you all about that, especially our dream team here of resilient missionaries. So yeah. So I'd love to kind of hear from everyone. Just what were some of the things that you sort of you were thinking about? Might be some of the adversities missionaries face. So. Yeah. Sorry, I
Well, I was just saying, probably, at least initially, being, the United States, we have a particular culture, and we have a different way of living, and I think, being immersed in a different culture that the living standards and the problems that people have, and of course the language is another important thing. But just having it's like going from hot water to cold.
Yeah.
Cold and hot. It's just there's a little bit of a shock in there.
Yeah.
And but then I think that there's I'm kind of an anomaly in a way, because when Romanian's so orthodox.
Right.
Okay, and I was immersed immediately in the church. And, I was renting a room from a priest's wife, and we were living in a cemetery right next to the church, and I could walk across the parking lot and have liturgy, and have liturgy every morning.
Right.
And so, the whole, I was just, the church was right there, and everyone that I met there was just very supportive, and so I really, my experience as a missionary is kind of strange. I think that these guys go, and they go into a place, and they don't have the church, and they don't have that structure, and they don't have, because being an Orthodox, we have a universal language. Okay, it's just wherever you go and you meet other Orthodox, you're on the same page. Yep. Okay? And so I think I think working in a non-Orthodox country would be more of a problem for me. It'd be more stressful, or people that don't have that community, that they just don't move. You live into a different community, but it's the same community, for me. And
Right.
I think other missionaries probably haven't had the opportunity of that particular experience. So it was, for me, I think it was just a unique thing.
Yeah, there's something about like working in a secular materialistic culture that really you're not immune to that. It impacts you, and absolutely. So I remember going to a bank in Albania like 2 weeks ago, and the door was round. It was like a little button, and I was just like, I have no idea what to do in this scenario. This is not a door in my world. Yeah, no, I push the button, nothing happens, and I'm like looking in. I'm like, is anyone in there? It's the middle of the day, they should be open. It's like, this is not, and you have that kind of, you have those doors like every day, all day. So you're like, I don't know how to open this door. So, right. So maybe, yeah. What were some of their adversities?
Yes, our group talked about the intense loneliness in the beginning, and we're talking about young people. Her son, he was one, my daughter, being so far away.
Yeah.
And we're very grateful for the cell phones and, being able to support them that way. But intense loneliness and then developing the resiliency to cope with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by its nature, you become an outsider. You become a cultural outsider so that other people could become insiders to God's kingdom. But you really do become an outsider, and there is an isolation and loneliness in that. Yeah, absolutely. So, how about you all in the back there?
We have a list.
Okay, great, awesome.
Proof of the list.
Yeah.
One of the first things that came up was safety, just personal safety in this crazy world that we live in right now. We talked a lot about loneliness and missing family events and missing your family terribly.
Yeah.
Living in a very different situation, different type of house or apartment or tent or wherever you're living is totally foreign to you. Learning the language, and someone brought up that there was a
Sister Gabriela.
Sister Gabriela. Why did you say that?
She said that she was a missionary too for over 10 years, and somebody goes, "You're not a really good missionary because you don't even know the language." And she says the next day she responded, "Yes, I speak 5 languages," and I don't remember them all, but I know it's the smile was number 1, the fingers, the touch. The tear, was it tears? Okay, and one more, but I don't remember. And love, those are the 5 languages. So, yeah.
We also talked about everybody always watching you to see what you did and how you acted, and did you do it properly, or did you break cultural rules and do it improperly?
Kind of feeling on display.
Feeling on display, yes.
Yeah.
Welcome to the priest-kids syndrome.
Right. Good. So here I want to just kind of bring out a couple of applications to when we think about this idea that missionaries really face an adversity that they cannot get through on their own. The first is, I think this is an important point to stress, which is when you experience stress doing ministry, you do not have a sympathetic nervous system in your body that's specific for ministry stress that floods with holy cortisol and adrenaline. No, stress is stress. Stress from good things is stress. And we know that in caring for people. There's a stress in that, right? And it's a holy stress, but it is still stress, and it takes an impact in our bodies. It impacts our minds, it impacts our hearts, it impacts our souls, it impacts our relationships. And so that's an important piece of this. The second is just that, the second is just the kind of point we made earlier, which is adversity by its definition is not something we just get over and get through on our own. We need the help of others to adapt and to heal. So I do a little bit of work with couples, and in the very beginning of that process, I hear their story. And most of the time, that's really important because couples come in and all they can see is like the problems right in front of them, and they can't see anything beyond that. And so taking that time to hear their story gives an opportunity to sort of put that down. And there are two things I'm listening for, especially in that story. One is, what's the miracle of how the two of you decided to build a life together? Because in every marriage, there's a miracle of why these two people, out of all the people in the world, said, we're going to build a life together. And couples need to be reminded of that miracle. And the second question is that I'm kind of looking for, listening to, is this is not the first hard patch that you got into, that we're now together. So you've had some other struggles in your life. How did you get through them? And that sort of optimism and that resiliency, how did you get through those hard things before? Seem to, I don't know why this is exactly. I guess it's a resiliency piece. It just shifts the whole thing. And all of a sudden, this, we can't agree on parenting, or whatever this thing is put into this perspective of we've had these things in our life before, and there's a goodness in our life. So those are two really important questions for us to think about in kind of as we're working with people, how we're supporting them. How have you faced adversity in the past? What helps you to get through it? Who helps you to get through it? That says a lot about kind of the process in front of you. And I think another is just what we call stress inoculation, which is what do you see as the adversity that's coming down the pike towards you? If you know, like, oh, this year is full of transition, it's going to be really tough. Then when you hit those tough marks, you're like, oh, okay, I knew this was coming. Or you like, oh, I knew there would be some sense of homelessness or isolation or loneliness. I knew that was coming. And all of a sudden, it's like you took a vaccine against it. And it doesn't get you sick the way it got you sick if you weren't preparing for it. Does that resonate? Okay. So the first part of this model is that missionaries face adversity. The second part is this three-legged stool response. And that response is their own effort, the effort of their core relationships, and the effort of the community around them. And so that really forms this three-legged stool. So this is another bit of research by Brenda Bosch out of South Africa, and she did this in 2005, and she did a survey with like 2,000 missionaries, a lot of missionaries. And one of the things she looked at was what people marked as their top 5 stressors, and compared that to people who had negative emotions about their experience of missions and people who had positive emotions about their experience as missions. So that's kind of an interesting thing. If you look at it, about 38-40% on both sides are just kind of other stressors. But when you get to the top stressors, you see financial is a big stressor for missionaries. Feeling overworked is a big stressor for missionaries. Maintaining spiritual disciplines is a stressor for missionaries. But then we get into these differences. And the first difference is for people who have a positive emotions about missions, family issues and caring for aging parents were the top, the next two, which are the sort of normal stage of life things that we all deal with, right? But for missionaries who had negative feelings about their emotions, the top two stressors were conflict with coworkers and isolation. And that's what she found to be the difference. So let's talk a little bit about kind of how we can respond. So in a year, I'll have kind of all of this research done and all the results done, and I'll be able to share more from kind of what I'm learning from people. But for today, I just wanted to share a few things from my own experience of walking alongside other people, some things, and specifically some things that I felt like would be helpful for all of us. So as kind of ways to build resiliency in our life. a lot of this is going to be a footnote to what was said this morning, which is kind of the great thing about a conference like this, where we get to come at one topic from these different perspectives. We get to hear something and all that. So, so there are habits and attitudes that can promote resiliency for us. And there's a bit of overlap between these, for sure. But the first is this idea of this habit of keeping rest, right? And finding rhythms of rest. One of the things that I often share with people as I'm working with them is, is that God in the very beginning gives Adam and Eve this, this pretty big job description, right? Take care of all of the birds of the air, all the fish of the sea, and everything in between. So it's very much the priest or the caregiver or the missionary job description. Take care of everything. And then he invites them to rest, gives them the Sabbath. And we have to really minister out of our rest instead of resting from our ministry. We have to do that. We have to minister out of our rest instead of resting from our ministry. So does that distinction make sense? No. If I don't have, I have to give out of what I have to give. And what I have to give, I get out of my rest. If I give out of, if I'm empty, I have nothing to give. So that's now I remember early in ministry, this is like early 2000s, doing this mental contemplation in my head of if I could work an extra hour a day, that would be 7 extra hours a week. Let's say I take 2 weeks off because, that's good for self-care. That would give me, 50 days. That's 10 weeks of more work that I could get done. And I'll just sleep an hour less and I'll get, and then I'll get 10 weeks of more work done. Now, do you think I got 10 weeks of work done? No, I got an ulcer and I developed diabetes and, we have to work out of our rest. The second is a second sort of practice or attitude that really fosters resiliency for us is the practice of gratitude. A lot of the research talks about the importance of meaning making and of optimism. And gratitude really captures both of that. So earlier this year, I bought a new car. I don't know if you've had this experience where all of a sudden I started seeing that car everywhere I went. Right? Has that happened to you? Yeah. And so gratitude is exactly the same way. If you start, I start my day with just 2 or 3, here's some things I'm grateful for. Today it's I'm pretty grateful that I'm first in the day, first in the schedule, and that I can relax. And, I'm grateful about that. I'm grateful for my wife who sent me a really lovely text this morning, letting me know that she was praying for me. That she was kind of cheering for me. So those are the things I'm really grateful for today. And if you do that, all of a sudden you start seeing that gratitude drive past you, throughout your day. The same way if you're focused on the sort of negative, the things that aren't as you would like them to be, all of a sudden you start seeing that everywhere too. And so that optimism, meaning making through that little practice of gratitude makes a big difference. So there's more, but I think those two are really important on the individual side. On the relational side, we need to build habits and practices of turning towards people. This kind of comes from Gottman, we can turn away from other people, we can turn against other people, and we need to find people who are safe, and we need to be safe people who we can turn towards, who others can turn towards us. And that's a critical piece of this. The illustration of this is it's like you're wearing a backpack. And you just, full of the stress and the burdens that you're carrying, and you just want to be able to show that to somebody and say, here's what's in my backpack. And you want that person to not do 2 things. You don't want that person to say, oh, I can fix that backpack for you. I know how to fix it. And you don't want them to say, oh, let me take your backpack from you. I got mine, but I can handle yours too. You just want them to look at it and say, wow, you are really carrying a lot. You're really carrying a lot. And that's a powerful thing. So this next one's a tough one, but resiliency isn't supposed to be easy, I guess. And that is the need for us to pray for our enemies. You can't work in ministry and not develop people that your emotional response to them is that they're your enemy. You can't go through life without that happening. And I don't think our resiliency can be any stronger than our relationships. And I don't think our relationships can be any stronger than the relationship we have with those that we hate. I remember early in my ministry, this person who I really loved, I really cared for, and was really hurt by. Dramatically hurt by. And I didn't know what to do about that. And so I began to pray for them. Now, I did not pray for them as though I were trying to get God to triangulate with me and say, Lord, would you help so-and-so repent and come to, see the truth of themselves. And Lord, I know you love them. I'm grateful for that because I sure don't. I didn't do any of that kind of thing. I prayed for them like I would pray for a friend. I said, Lord, would you bless their ministry? Would you bless their family? Lord, would you give them the good things of this world? Lord, would you be with them? And I can tell you for that year, I didn't mean any of it. Right? But every time I had that anger, that angst, that negativity dwell up in me, I turned towards God in prayer and prayed for them. And in time, that all shifted. And I can think about them with real love now, that wasn't there. And so those would be kind of some thoughts on this. There are certainly some communal responses. A lot of that I don't have a lot to say right now about. I do think one of my hopes in being at Oak Camper is a chance to meet people who are caregivers and who can come alongside and support our missionaries. There's I feel a real burden to sort of help to foster some of that network and build those relationships, so that when somebody comes back on furlough, they can say, hey, I need to have some dental work done, and I can say, well, I know a dentist in this area. Will you be there? Yeah, and we can make that connection. That's a real burden for me, that our missionaries are not just by themselves, but that we as the church and individually as part of that church can support them. So all right, we're gonna skip this for time, and I want to give you something that was given to me during that 2014 that was such a stressor. It's hard to express how difficult that year was in my life. I did not think I was going to make it. But thank God somebody gave me this thing, and it's so simple and it made a huge impact on my life. So I want to share it with you. So it's the stress support scale. And I want to share this with you for yourself, and I also want to share it with you so you can share it with others. When we're flooded, and our our amygdala is what's running the show, right, and not our frontal cortex. There seems to be a couple things that happen for us. One is we're so overwhelmed, we don't have any clarity about what we're overwhelmed by, and we tend to throw off those things that support and care for and nurture us. And so it's like you're a scale, and all of a sudden you add a bunch of stress and you let go of the support, and you have disequilibrium in your life. Does that make sense? And so what the sort of good news about that is you can add support, and you can add enough support that you can carry a really heavy burden of stress. I actually have a lot more stress in my life today than I did 3 years ago, ironically, but I have more support. And so So one of the things that's really helpful here is to actually write down, well, what are your top stressors? Because that kind of engaging that, that frontal cortex. And then write down, what are the things that are supports in my life? And so let me just, I don't want to take time to do this right now with you, but I really want to encourage you to think about, apply this for your own life, apply this for the life of the people that you care for, and think about this for the lives of our missionaries. We've talked about what are some of the stressors that they face, and what might be some of the supports. So I wanted to give that to you. Does that, any thoughts on that or questions? I wish we had time to actually do it, but.
Can I share an experience as a parent?
Yes.
I have not been in missionary anywhere, but my son has been.
Yeah.
So it is a particular experience that you touched earlier on with how is it managed. And I'm going to tell you a little story.
Yeah, please do.
I am in church, Nico is in Africa, and every person comes to me and tells me, "Are you crazy? What's wrong with you? How can you possibly let him do that?"
Mm-hmm.
So little by little, this is adding up, and I'm smiling, and I'm keeping it all in, and I'm giving them that kind of God will provide, and I'm trusting him.
Yeah.
And little by little, this stress is going heavier and heavier and heavier. And I am during Orthros in church on Sunday. And as the priest is sensing as going around, he stopped at me and he said to me, no idea how I was feeling. No, I had not. I was keeping it to myself. I was smiling. I was believing in what he was doing. But inside me, there was a heavy rock at that moment. And he looked at me, even though he never talks to anybody, and he said to me, God is taking care of Nico. And I burst into tears, and that cured me. And I'm talking this about the support that you're saying about the Holy
Spirit.
That, yes, that even in a moment where you don't see where the support is coming, because you have to be this strong, the support finds a way and comes in and brings the balance that you're talking about here. I just wanted to share this.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. That was the gospel reading from this morning, that, God sees, takes care of the sparrows, and we're certainly more valuable than the sparrows, and he's numbered the hair on our head, and he loves us, and he cares for us, and he's going to take care of it. Absolutely. So missionaries experience adversity, and that adversity is more than they can handle, right? And they respond, but their community responds. The people that are closest to them respond, and that builds up their resiliency. Just like your priest who responded, and this ultimately leads to a reshaping of their sense of self. So, one of the things my supervisor gave me was this acronym, ILAC. I am lovable and capable. And she said that, all of us are born with that. That's our sense of ourselves. I am lovable and I am capable. And that we have experiences in our life that begin to rip that up, begin to cut notches out of it. But then we also have the experiences that sort of begin to tape that back together and repair that. And so for missionaries, there is this experience for us in ministry, there's this experience of first this I am a victim who is hurting, right? That's my sense of myself, my sense of the world. And there's through that effort of the people around us, through our own effort, we begin to move towards becoming survivors who are healing. I love that language about cancer survivors. Right? That's really powerful. But ultimately, when you look at the literature and you look at the lives of the saints, you discover that there's this next step where you actually can become a celebrant who is helping others heal. My gut is that all of us that are in this professional caring capacity do so out of our own, the redemption of our own experience. Right, and the kind of making right what was wrong. I suspect that's the case for all of us. So, I know it's certainly the case for me. So, so that's basically the model. My research is actually trying to get into the details of like how does this look in people's lives. Sorry, and what I want to do, just kind of as we begin to conclude here, is talk a little bit about just reflect theologically on resiliency. So, one of the things that I fell in love with orthodoxy was how we absolutely experience the life of Christ. Right? We don't commemorate the life of Christ. We experience it, and that's the power of our like Holy Week services, is that we walk with Christ and we walk with the disciples, and resiliency becomes this very personal way that we walk with Christ, where we experience His cross, His death, His resurrection. That's what I mean. Really, the death, the cross, and the resurrection is the ultimate act of resiliency. Is the ultimate act of bouncing back from adversity, and our participate and that fills us like that becomes our experience. Right? Does that connect? Okay. And there's also this piece of this which is really, really Eucharistic. Like the Eucharist doesn't begin with our offering to God bread and wine and Him offering to us Himself. It begins with God's offering to us. God offers us the universe. He offers us bread, He offers us wheat and grapes and yeast floating aimlessly through the air. He offers us salt, water, and we, in our effort, break them, mold them, turn them into something that is that's different, and we offer that back to God, and God receives our bread and our wine, and He offers back to us something different. He offers back to us His very self, and we receive Him, and we go out into the world, and we offer our lives back to God. And so there's this receiving and offering that happens. Now, have any of us woken up in the morning and said, today's a great day for some adversity that's just going to knock the socks off of me? No. Adversity is something that we don't go chasing. It's something that finds us. We receive it. And, these efforts like, gratitude and Sabbath and turning towards and praying for our enemies and that kind of stuff, they aren't salvific in and of themselves, but we offer them. There are fish and loaves, we offer them. God receives them and offers back to us that life that we really want, that life of authentic, altruistic, celebrant, caring for others. That life, that's the life we want, right? And so that would be, so the resilient missionary receives adversity. They offer the efforts of themselves and others to promote resiliency. And they receive a life of altruism lived in union with Christ and participation in His mission. I'd really encourage you to reflect on this today, if you have a chance. How might a theology of resiliency impact your practice? How might this kind of impact what you're doing? So I want to end with, I've kind of peppered this presentation with these pictures of this art called Kintsukuroi, and I want to end with talking about this. Kintsukuroi is a Japanese art where a piece that has been broken is repaired with gold-dusted lacquer. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But it's also a philosophy that sees brokenness not as something that needs to be discarded, not as something that needs to be covered up with super glue, but as a treasured history to be honored. And I would propose to you that this is an image, an icon of the resilient missionary who is broken by the adversity that they face, but through the golden love of God and others, they're made whole. They're made earthen vessels that are worthy of that treasure. Right? 2 Corinthians. So I want to, Okay. So, yeah. So, I want to give you just 2 minutes right now to kind of just write down what do you want to take away from our time together. I know how conferences go. We're going to all be like, flooded the next 2 days with great stuff. And so I just want to give you just a minute to just write down, what do you want to take away from our time together? Okay. Basically, we're out of time. So let me take 2 seconds, and I've got a copy of that Rawl Holmes scale if you want to see it, or anyone else would like to see it. Yeah, it's here.
I've got a summary of your whole talk, and if we could all just stand up.
Yeah.
And the summary is, you can stand up. And you talked about the individual, and the individual first has to love God. So put your hands up and love God with all your might, all your strength, all your mind, all your soul. And then we love our neighbor. Put our hands to horizontal. And then if you hold out your hands by yourself for a while, you'll get tired. But if you connect, you'll get tired a lot later than you would by yourself. So that community is very important.
Amen. Thank you.
And let's thank our leader of the workshop. I think this was a great session.
So, if you know, so I'm just real quick. My ask of you is, I'm doing this research project on missionary resiliency. I am delighted. I have like 550 responses so far. It's about twice as much as I was dreaming of having, and so I'm going to collect surveys. It's just a quick 10-minute survey. I've got some cards with the link to it, and so if you know a missionary or some missionaries, I'd be very grateful if you would pass this on to them.